Good morning, NAGDCA members. We have a very special treat for you today. I'm joined by Keith Overly, the recently retired Executive Director of Ohio Deferred Compensation. Keith ran the state plan in Ohio for 17 years, is that right, Keith?
Close to that, yes. Mm-hmm.
And retired last month, so at the end of March. He's also a former NAGDCA board member and past president. And on a personal note, he's one of our favorite people to work with. So we wanted to catch Keith before he coasted off into retirement to capture some of the substantial wisdom he gained during his time running the plan in Ohio. Luckily for us, we didn't have to search too far because he's at home with the rest of us at the moment. So Keith was gracious enough to sit down with us and answer a few of my questions that we hope will be illuminating for you as you continue on your respective career paths. So with that, Keith, thank you very much for joining us. We're glad to have you here.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be here. My time is much more flexible now.
Yeah, I'm sure. Nothing else to do, right?
I'll keep it busy, but this is good.
Right. So like many of our members, you didn't actually start in defined contribution plans specifically. You came to Ohio Deferred Comp from city management. You crossed the border up to Michigan for a little while and then came back to Ohio. How did your previous experience prepare you for the new role when you came to Ohio Deferred Comp?
Well, I was deputy city manager for the city of Kalamazoo, and a lot of the management experience and training, whether it's personnel management or project management, those things transferred pretty easily. Before that, I'd spent many years as finance director for the city, and one of my responsibilities was to administer the pension plan as well as a couple of defined contribution plans. And I was fortunate that we had an investment committee that had some real experts on it, some people that had experience with large corporate pension plans. And so a couple of those people became my mentors and really helped give me background to get into that new area for me, which was pensions at that time. And I was involved in it for about 17 years for the city of Kalamazoo. The other thing I think that helped me is once I got into pension administration, became involved with the Governmental Finance Officers Association Committee on Retirement and Benefit Administration. And, that gave me an opportunity to work with, I think, 15 or 20 of my peers over a number of years, working on best practices, legislative issues, and so forth that had to do with both defined benefit and defined contribution plans. So that was a really valuable experience for me as well.
Right. So you had a pretty good background in it, even though you weren't running the plan specifically. What did you have to learn right away when you came in as the executive director at Ohio Deferred Comp?
Well, two things come to mind. I think the first thing is Ohio Deferred Compensation is, as some people may know, we're a little bit unique in that we do our record keeping internally. So that was something I did not have experience in. So I had to kind of jump into the deep end on that. But fortunately, I had some excellent staff, and they were able to train me and bring me along on the record keeping side of things. I think the other thing that was unique coming from a single, a city, it's one thing to communicate to your participants or your employees within one organization. But when I came to Ohio, we had about, at that time, about 1,700 different employers we worked with. And so now on a statewide basis, we had to look at how we could effectively communicate with both the employers as well as the employees on that statewide basis. So I think those are the two key things that I had to really adapt to.
Yeah, and I know a lot of our state plans are in that same situation. That's a really tough one to come into, I'm sure. So you've been associated with the industry and involved in the industry for a long time. How has it evolved over your time in Ohio and even your time working with GFOA before in Michigan?
Well, I do go back a ways, so I can remember when
not that far back though.
With the maximum contribution, the annual contribution for a participant was about $4,000, and I think it even went down further than that. So now we're up close to $20,000, and that's without catch-up. So there's been legislative changes that really made a difference from that standpoint. And And there are many other legislative changes that have made the programs more flexible, easier in terms of how you can take money out of the program in retirement. A lot of things that NAGDA itself has been involved in and been effective at lobbying over the years. When you look at the investment side, when I started at Ohio Deferred Comp, I would say we were almost entirely in mutual funds. And then we had the standard set of investment options. But at that time, target date funds were starting to become popular. And so that was a real evolution from the investment side to where participants, and most of them not really being investment savvy, could easily go into a target date fund and be properly diversified. And then moving into from the mutual funds to the CITs and the separate accounts, we got into, at one point, the issue became fee transparency. And I think that evolved in a good way too, that once fees were becoming more transparent, we were also able to, not just us, but throughout the industry, be able to reduce investment fees substantially. So I think that those are some of the main things I see happening on the investment side. When I first started with the Ohio Deferred Compensation, communication was pretty much one size fits all, and it was fairly basic communication. And over the years, that's evolved to where it's more individualized and personalized, and including, what a lot of plans are doing now to provide retirement income estimates on an individual basis. We've moved from, postcards and mailings to email to then targeted email. We've gotten into more webinars, videos. Here we are now on Zoom. This is going to be something else for us.
Certainly a new day, right?
In general. So a lot of changes in that communication area. And then, I think something that was always big for me too, that once I started learning more about behavioral economics, is that research has really changed things. It kind of brought about the idea of making, with the target date funds, making it easy to be able to invest. But then also bringing about auto enrollment, auto escalation. Those are two things that I think really have the ability to move the needle over time for our participants to become much more successful.
Yeah, well said. And which of those, there's a lot that you went through there. It's a ton of change, a lot of evolution over time. The way, the importance of defined contribution plans for public sector employees has certainly changed with the times. Is there any certain area you see as having the greatest impact, or do you kind of feel like the combination of all of those really has moved things the most?
Well, I think we're still challenged with, even though we're doing a much better way and using much different ways to communicate with the employees or participants. That's kind of a hard sell, to try and get people to actually pay attention and listen. But I'd go back to the legislation, the various changes that have happened over the years regarding legislation, as well as the behavioral aspects. It really boils down to me with supplemental defined contribution plans, two issues. One is saving adequately, and the other is investing wisely. And so to the extent that behavioral economics has helped us along that road, I think that's been a big impact and will continue to be.
Yeah, well, for sure. So a lot of change, a lot of years and seeing things evolve. How did you keep up with it? What did you do to keep yourself, just personally as Keith Overly, up with all of the things that were happening in the industry?
Well, obviously NAGDA was a big part of that. When you look at,
appreciate it.
And I think over the years, I've maybe only missed one webinar.
All right.
And, the NAGDA conferences have been a great place to learn, not only from the sessions, but from the networking with all of your peers. And, what I'd say to people too is, and I learned this back from being with the Governmental Finance Officers Association, but getting involved in those committees and on the board, it's not just serving, say, the organization or NAGDA and its members, but it's also a great learning experience. And, you're working with other peers that have great background, knowledge, experience. And it really takes, I think it really is a big leap in terms of the ability to understand what the trends are and how everything works. So I would really encourage other people to try and get involved as well on both the committees or the board.
Yeah. And you had a long relationship with NAGDA, and it is a big time commitment though, right? I mean, you especially being on the board, the committees that you're talking about. Was there a tipping point, or why did you decide to get involved? Was there concern that the volunteer time would become too much, or was it important enough to kind of keep yourself moving in the industry?
Well, again, it goes back to being on the board and committee at the GFOA and realizing the value of that. The other thing I would say too, I was fortunate in that I had my own board that was very supportive of me being active in professional organizations like NAGDA. I think that's obviously very important because you are going to have to spend some time and effort on that. But I think my board recognized that the value was there for me and for our program, as well as serving NAGDA.
Yeah. So you were very integral to a lot of the things that we did here for a very long time. You helped us start our benchmarking initiative, where we built kind of a common database of plan level information. Why was that important to you? That one took a long time as well. I know from talking to the contractors that worked to build our portal, they said they almost built you your own office in there because you were in there so much. What was it about the data component of things that really excited you and made you feel like you should spend that kind of time?
Well, I was always interested in metrics and being able to measure how we were doing. And within our organization, for almost the entire time I was there, we had about 50 different data points that we would monitor over the years. And so we could check against ourselves and, the trends and where we were doing well, where we weren't doing as well, and using that data to try and figure out how we can improve our program. My frustration, though, was that I couldn't find a good source of comparable data with other similar programs or plans like ours. And so I think it was about maybe 8 or 10 years ago, we began developing our own survey and surveying some other large plans. That was useful to us, but it was also labor intensive for us.
Right.
And so when I became a member of the board, the NAGDA board, at one of the strategic planning meetings, an issue came up about the surveying and how we could improve the surveying and to set up this new benchmarking initiative. And as soon as I heard that, I was really excited about that. And it just so happened too that the firm that we employed, the NAGDA employed, happened to be a Columbus area firm. So it just made it natural that it was easy for me than any other board member to be able to get with them face to face and work on the benchmarking program.
Yeah, and you really built it up over time and I think built it into something really great. And we're trying to continue that, as you know, with our partnership with eBree and to take that into kind of a higher level of development. And for those of you who don't know, Keith is going to help us out in his retired time. He's going to continue to volunteer with us. He'll be the chair of our Plan Sponsor Advisory Council to bring the plan sponsor perspective to that partnership. So we're hoping that can become kind of bring to fruition the effort that you started with the benchmarking survey. And we're really excited to get that going with eBree this year.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about that too. That development is more recent, and since I've been off the board, but I've been following it obviously, and I think it's a really great step forward for the organization.
Great, and we're looking forward to it. So I'm gonna, as we kind of get to the end here, I want to see if you can pull out your crystal ball. It's a very, very difficult time to predict the future, I think, right now. There's a lot going on, but from someone who has your kind of experience and maybe has the ability to step back a little bit, how do you see this industry evolving in the future? I know, difficult times and everyone's there's a lot of unknown right now, but what do you see as maybe the near future, at least for the industry?
Well, I think technology is going to play a big part, and I think it's even more evident to me given COVID-19. In the last couple of weeks that I was still employed at Ohio Deferred Compensation, we had to go kind of warp speed into developing how we were going to, for the most part, work from home. We probably had, including our customer service efforts throughout the state, probably had 20% of our combined staff with nationwide that work from home. And within a couple of weeks, we got to where probably 85% of the staff was working from home. But I think, with artificial intelligence and everything else being done on the technology side, and, going into mobile apps and so forth, I think that's going to play a big part in how plans operate and interface with their participants in the future. That's one of the big things that comes up. Now, the thing that's a couple of things already there that I've mentioned, behavioral economics and things like automatic enrollment, automatic escalation, I think they're great, but I think right now they've been underutilized in the public sector. And so I hope to see that those are utilized to a much greater extent. I know there's some obstacles to that too, including say legislative or legal issues in different states with automatic enrollment. But I think that's going to be something important to try and see how plans can change legislation or get past some of those obstacles so that they can use automatic enrollment.
Great. All right. Well, so to close up, if you can imagine a young Keith Overly coming in to your job and he's starting fresh, what do you tell him today? What do you tell somebody who's coming into a job similar to the way you did a few years back?
Well, I think retirement income is becoming so important. And the evolution we've seen more in the private sector has concerned me probably for the last decade or so, where pension plans have been terminated. Defined contribution plans, which were initially set up as supplemental plans, are now becoming primary plans for people in the private sector. And even in the public sector with pension plans, a lot of the plans have had to go through pension reform, reduce some of the benefits. So defined contribution plans are becoming more important on the one hand, but we're still not getting people to save enough and to invest again wisely enough. And so, I think that if we don't continue to make improvements in the retirement industry, if you will, the next couple decades, I think could be a real drain on the national economy. So I think there's a lot of opportunity and challenges with that. But I think, depending on the various skill sets of of people coming into the industry now too, there's so many different kinds of opportunities. I talked about record keeping for one thing, and that involves a lot of information technology specialists. You've got communication and education. Financial wellness is becoming a big thing to improve financial literacy. And then you can get into plan design issues. You can get into, again, if we're going to look at legislation and how to move legislation to make plans even better, you've got people that need to be into governmental relations, lobbying, things like that. So there are a lot of exciting different ways that people with different skill sets and different interests can come in. And, retirement is here to stay. And even though it may change and evolve over time, but people are going to be retired. They're going to need to have retirement plans. And so it's something that somebody can get involved in and make a career of.
Yeah. Well, as always, Keith, very well put. I have to be honest, I don't envy the person who has to fill your shoes at Ohio Deferred Comp. That is a really difficult set of shoes to step into, but it sounds like you have a really great team in place in Ohio. I'm sure to help them out. So unfortunately, I think that's all the time we have for today. I do want to convey a very heartfelt thank you to you for everything that you've done for the industry, for Ohio, for NAGDA. As I mentioned, we're gonna squeeze a little more work out of you through the research lab and our partnership with EBRI, so you don't get away from us that easily. But we wish you well. We wish you a safe, prosperous, and very healthy retirement in this era. Hopefully, you come to visit us at the conference and at any of the events we have once we're all allowed to leave our houses. So thank you again for joining us.
The opportunity and all the opportunity and the education I've gotten through NAGDA too.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us, Keith. We really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We hope you learned a little something today from somebody who's been a really great standard bearer for this industry for a long time. So all of you, stay safe out there and have an excellent day.